Hi, class, and welcome to week 7. Can you believe it? Oh my gosh, it's week 7. And this week we're going to cover two chapters 13 and 16 this week. So let's get started. All right. So, chapter 13 is about multiple parties, groups, and teams in negotiations. And so, let's start our slideshow presentation. We will get started. All right, look at this, the nature of multi-party negotiations. And really, these negotiations happens when there are more than two parties involved and work together to achieve a collective objective. So like we're working together to achieve your objective of educating you. So there's various parties involved and various parties who want something from the particular situation. And so we have to be mindful of those things. So two-party and multi-party negotiations, their really differences are one, the number of parties. Each party may be principal or agent and have an equal or unequal power and status. And informational versus computational, excuse me, sorry about that. Informational versus computational complexity, keeping track is really keeping track. I'm trying to stay on the slide. Keeping track is a challenge. Pre-planning is critical. And then social complexity is the process of evolution may depend on motivations of parties. Cohesion is a must, but conflict may hinder that. So there's the number of parties, informational versus computational, social complexity, and then there's procedural complexity, which allows for more time to discuss how to manage the process procedure. Logistical, where physical or psychological distance can hinder the trust. And strategic, the process may evolve into a series of one-on-one talks, and there could be subject to audience dynamics, may be used strategically and for building coalitions. And so the number of parties involved, I tell you, if you've ever bought a house, you know that there's a lot involved in buying a house. If you're negotiating for a contract for a business, there's a number of parties involved in that particular aspect of the negotiations. And so there are procedurals, complexity involved in buying a house. Logistics, they have that down. But as far as where you close, that's the psychological aspects of things going on to the parties, the person that's buying and what's going on, the person that's selling. Informational, what kind of information do you need? Closing on the deal or before closing on the deal, making sure everything is secure. So social complexity is not as much there in buying a house, but there's definitely some social complexity and definitely strategic complexity as well. So coalitions and multi-party negotiations. So coalition members exert strength by expressing solidarity with each other, agreeing to help each other achieve a common objective, and dominating discussion time. Agreeing to support each other as agreements emerge, and a snowballing coalition starts with a few people holding common interests, agreeing to support each other's views. Other individuals then negotiate with the coalition to incorporate their own views into the final solution. Those unwilling to negotiate or change their views are left out. Naturally, we can't include you if you're not willing to or not listening in the process. So what dynamics make a multi-party negotiation? You can test assumptions and inferences, share relevant information. You can focus on interests and not on position. Explain yourself, be specific, use examples, agree on the meaning of important words, disagree openly with any member of the group, and make statements, then invite questions and comments. There's also jointly designing ways to solutions, discussing undiscussables, as well as keep discussions focused, not distracting the group or expect all members to participate in the process, exchange relevant information with parties not at the table, and make decisions by consensus. And finally, conduct a self-critique. Knowing who we are and how we're performing and what we're about is extremely important. So also under managing multi-party negotiations, we have to understand they may have 4 core elements. And these elements are preferences, people, processes, and places. The 4 Ps are P to the 4th power: preferences, people, processes, and places. And one approach looks at the multi-party negotiations from the perspective of developmental stages. And this is the pre-negotiation stage, the actual negotiation stage, and the agreement stage. Now, the pre-negotiation stage, this stage involves informal contact among parties, identifying participants. Parties must agree on who is invited to the talks, do your own planning, indicate your preferences, and make sure, by all means, your point of view is heard. Form coalitions to support or block a particular agenda item, and then define members' roles. These roles, relationships, and relationship roles, as well as self-oriented roles. And so again, the roles could be task, relationship, or self-oriented roles involved in the process. Now, understanding the costs and consequences of no agreement. It's like buying a house. If you can't come to an agreement, that's time wasted in the negotiations process. If you can't agree on a price to buy that house at, or buy a business at, or any of those things on the table. So understand the costs and consequences of no agreement. Learn the issues and construct an agenda. Parties may also agree to abide by a set of ground rules in this process. The formal negotiation stage involves appoint an appropriate chair, use and restructure the agenda, ensure a diversity of information and perspectives, scouts, ambassadors, coordinators, and guards, and then ensure consideration of all available information. The Dali technique, brainstorming, and the normative group technique. Manage conflict effectively, review and manage the decision rules, and strive for a first agreement. Manage problematic behavior among those parties involved. And so the agreement stage happens when there are 4 key problem solving steps occurring during this stage. So a few minutes ago, we talked about the formal negotiation stage, where we start with the appointment, using the restructured agenda, and ensuring diversity. Now we talk about the agreement stage. So we're out of negotiations, and now we're in the agreement stage. And in this stage, there are 4 key problem solving steps occurring really during this stage. It's selecting the best solution. The fairness of the solution should be one of the primary criteria. Developing an action plan, which increases the likelihood of a complete, effective, and timely implementation. Implement the action plan occurs outside the group, but needs to follow the group's guidelines. And then evaluate outcomes and the process. This step should not be deferred or omitted in the agreement stage. So what the chair can do to help. So there's always a chair of something. And so over whether it's a project or just going into place, or even buying a house, there's somebody chairing that particular scenario. And so you move the group towards selecting one or more of the options, listen for emerging snowball coalitions, shape and draft tentative agreements, write it down and work on the language, discuss implementation and follow-ups or next steps, make assignments for key action steps, thank people for their participation, hard work, and efforts, have a dinner or party to celebrate, and then organize and facilitate the post-mortem process. Then this ensures that learning makes you available if the deal falls apart. So there are interim negotiations that may be happening. The term interim negotiation describes these situations: two or more negotiators acting as representative of interests of two or more organized groups or teams, and then sharing interests and priorities with two or more representative inter-team negotiations, two or more representatives from other groups or teams with their own interests and priorities. And so then there's only a small amount of research that investigates inter-team negotiation issues, and those are summarized into five broad spectrums or areas. So inter-team negotiations research findings show that intergroup negotiations produce better outcomes than negotiation between individuals. And at the same time, team-on-team negotiations are sometimes more competitive and better at claiming value dynamics. Accountability pressures are different for negotiators representing teams compared to individuals. And when negotiating as a team, negotiators must also manage within those team dynamics. Finally, aligning your team's interests and implementing team discipline with that relationship and attitude among team members, it really affects the negotiation process and the outcomes. And that's it for this chapter. It was a short chapter, but powerful, powerful, powerful. And it covered a lot among the nature and multi-party negotiations and how that process occurs and goes through, and what happens in the process as well. So that's it for chapter 13. I look forward to hearing your input on this about chapter 13. All right.